Hello.
Howdy do, howdy do.
How do you do? Can you
Oh,
hear me okay?
yes. How about me? Going through okay?
Awesome. Yeah, we are good.
Lent. Right. Let's
I've got CN Tower. Well, no, you can't quite see the CN Tower. Not quite.
looks
You,
beautiful.
you you can get it behind me
Okay, yeah. Well,
on one night that I did once upon a time.
next. Yeah. No, that's the next best thing. How's the weather?
I haven't been outside yet, to be honest. I was hoping actually after this I'll do a little bit of weight, some core, then head outside. It looks like the sun is at its peak, so that's good.
Weights and wait, what did you say? Weights and core?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of weights and core. I was going to do like a core workout, but then just throw in a little bit of legs. I'm trying to do some more running specific strength training lately just because I'm trying to amp up my 10K. Yeah, and I've only been for one run this week. I'm not on track. So I'm going to see if I can hit another one today and Sunday.
How long of a run?
On Sunday, I try to do the longer runs, so I'll probably do like 45. And then today it would be like a tempo run. So I would try to run just on pace for some time,
Yeah,
maybe only half an hour. Yeah, but like the tempo, it's getting easier. Obviously, strength training like really helps,
definitely.
right? So I'm focusing on like my calves and like my internal rotation and all of those things,
Yeah,
those little Easter eggs.
yeah,
So
yeah.
important.
Super important for like tolerating we don't really usually people don't necessarily look at running in that sense, but that every stride, every step is like essentially a rep, right? And there's all types of
Yep.
things going through your body. But yeah, what a great way to keep healthy, right? Which
Yeah.
is right on topic with today's video, health. Hello, everyone. We've been looking forward to this one, just like all the others. So we are going to be talking about health and what's involved in it. Now, really try to understand that it's such a broad concept. There's a lot of nuance attached with it. Um, for our purposes, we will mention some of the different dimensions of health, but for our purposes, and to sort of stay in our lane and our scope, we're going to be focusing on physical health primarily. Uh, so before we dive into it, we'll start by sort of giving a bit of a working definition, as we always like to do, just so everybody is on track with us. And we try to minimize misunderstanding as much as possible. So Francesca, if let's say I was a client who came up to you and was like, what's health? Like I hear healthy food, healthy this, exercising is healthy. How would you define health to someone?
Health to me, and actually I think this is how the World Health Organization defines it, is it's three prongs to it. It's physical health, it's mental health, and it's also social health. Those three things are really what encompass health. So it's over time we can kind of look at somebody and just kind of deem that they're healthy, but really that might not be the whole picture. You can't just look at somebody and just say, okay, that person's really healthy, but there's so much more to it. We have to consider that a person's mental health is also optimal. And mental health is when somebody can cope, right? It's the ability to cope to day-to-day stressors and having that self-efficacy. Social health, social interactions, that's a social determinant of health. Like that's a whole other topic, but that's also another aspect of health that needs to be considered when you look at somebody's overall picture of whether they're healthy or not. And then we also have the physical, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. Can a person attain those physical benchmarks? There's certain standards that are set based on numerous studies, a lot of evidence that goes to support this. And a person is considered physically healthy when they're able to reach those physical markers that like your physician or your movement and health specialist would test you on.
Yep, pretty much all of that. And before we sort of dive into the physical health aspect of size, I think it was very important that you mentioned the other two dimensions, and that, you know, there's a lot involved in it, so that sometimes people don't necessarily even possess the tools, the knowledge, or the information. Hey, Gavin, to, to be able to access those different dimensions, right? Like, we know, again, I look at things from a very social, political, and philosophical lens to try and understand them better, and health is no different. So there's you know, challenges for some people. There's somewhat of a socioeconomic ceiling that a lot of people can't break through and say, for example, this has been a huge issue. Look at what's happening in Flint, Michigan. That's been happening for a long time. They don't really have access to good drinking water. And it's like, well, what do you think is going to happen to your every other aspect of health if one of the most basic needs of life is not, you know, addressed?
It's not met. Yeah.
Right. So with that said, we realize there's a lot more to it, and it's much more complex than our talk today is going to cover, for sure, which is why we're sticking just to the physical aspects. So without further ado, maybe we can talk a little bit about sort of what the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists, CSEP, sets out as physical benchmarks or guidelines that everybody should try and incorporate into their life.
Right. So the CSEP, Canadian Society for Exercise, it's the gold standard evidence-based organization, and they collaborate with a lot of researchers across different universities and physicians, and they've studied all aspects of health, and those things can be considered sleep, sedentary behavior, and movement. And they came up with this guideline, and they like it to be kind of referenced as Canada's food guide, but for movement. So if we abide by these guidelines, then we are striving towards optimal health levels. So those three prongs, as I mentioned, it's movement or physical activity, and sleep, and sedentary behavior. And there are set guidelines to all of those, and each of those pillars influence the other. So with physical activity, so for adults 18 to 65, I believe, they recommend 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every week. And it changes based on what age group or special population group that you might be a part of. So if you suffer from MS, or if you have a chronic metabolic syndrome or disease, or if you're a child, those guidelines slightly differ. And then we have sleep. It's about going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, and getting good quality sleep, and trying to avoid screen time at least an hour before you go to bed. That way you have optimal melanin production, and you can actually sleep soundly and relax the mind. With sedentary behavior, they are saying, I believe for the same age group for adults, it's no more than 3 hours of recreational screen time. But we have definitely, due to the pandemic, we could thank the pandemic for that, we are surpassing the amount of levels or how long we're sitting on a day-to-day basis. So this is problematic, because if we're sitting a lot, then there's only so many hours in the 24-hour day, then that's less time that you're moving. Okay? And the whole point of these movement guidelines is just to have a person look at their 24-hour day and ensure that there's an adequate balance of all three of those pillars. And you want to be striving to hit those guidelines, and all of those pillars will influence the others. So if you are not physically active, there's a good chance that your sleep can be hindered and that you're going to be sitting more. If you are not getting a good sleep, then that's going to influence how your physical activity will be the next day. So all three of those sides of the triangle, they need to be addressed, analyzed objectively as best as possible. Am I getting enough good quality sleep? Am I moving at least 30, 60 minutes every day, moderate physical activity? Am I trying to reduce how long I'm sitting? So I know a lot of us are working from home, but how often do you get up and take a break? Can you take walks, right? So to CSEP using that resource, it's about, like, health is about looking at all three of those pillars. And again, we're not even talking about mental health yet, or social health, which is defined by the World Health Organization. We're not even addressing that. We're just talking about that part, right? So when it comes to saying, like, what is health and am I healthy and how do I know, it's a huge umbrella. There's so much to uncover, but we can do the best that we can with the resources that we have available to us, and utilizing the help of a fitness coach, not being afraid to ask your doctor questions. Could you break this down, and how can I meet these levels? Do I have to do this with medication? Can I do it with exercise? That's that's a whole other conversation. I'm such a huge advocate for exercise is medicine. And exercise, we can see, again, with the numerous amount of studies that exist over years, that exercise is the gateway to improved social health and improved mental health. There's so much, like the most recent studies that I came across recently was physical activity or physical exercise, and what's the difference? And one is more structured and one is more leisure. The one that's more structured tends to have a greater efficacy on your mental health, because you have to pay attention to specific tasks, you're tracking, you're monitoring, and it starts to influence all other aspects of your life because you're focused on achieving a goal. If you're just kind of walking or dancing, that's all great. Do what you need to do to move, because movement is great. But for mental health, it's showing that structured exercise is a little bit more efficient when it comes to boosting that. Health is it's a very, very
broad. Okay. Two things I want to say to that. The first one that I'm glad you touched on about this idea of exercise or movement as medicine. Just really quickly to say about it, that it doesn't necessarily mean that, and I feel like a lot of people have this misunderstanding. It's medicine. It means it must be good for me, so I'm going to do more of it, or I'm going to do as much of it as I can. But we tend to right away forget. And this is where a trainer or a coach is super important. Somebody qualified to understand how to program the structured part into your life is important. Tylenol is a medicine, but you take 8 of those at a time and you're out from whatever nap you go into, right? So in that sense, we have to understand the dose response, and what is what CSEP guidelines sort of give us, and that's what they are, guidelines. They are relative. They are different from person to person, and CSEP understands this. What we have to understand is they're basically telling us this is the minimum effective dose, right? Mm-hmm. If you could get this much in, you're going to see some good improvements. And if you have those improvements, you're going to maintain them, right? And it's very, it's 150 minutes a week is like, they even say you can break it up however you want. But I was
just about to touch on that, yeah.
10-minute increments at least, right? The second part that I really think is really important, I got this right from the CSEP basically manual, the older manual is called the CPAFLA, where they say health is a resource for everyday life. And I really, really, really like that. I remember the first time I read it like 10 years ago, it really stuck with me, that there are certain things you do that are going to grow that pool, that resource, and there are things you do that are going to take away from that resource. At the end of the day, every day you're taking a little bit from that resource. And some days maybe a lot more. So on days where you might go for a fun night of drinking with friends or family, you're going to be drawing a lot on that resource. Or on certain weeks where you might not be getting enough sleep because you have a big project at work to do, or work stress or whatever, you're drawing on that resource. Things like strength training and cardiovascular activity or physical activity, both structured and non-structured, are going to help expand that pool a little bit more so that you have more of that resource to draw on and essentially enjoy your everyday life. Because at the end of the day, also, it's not just about the quantity of life, it's also about the quality of life, right?
I think, yeah, and it's so funny how you're saying that health is a resource, an everyday resource. I think there was an analogy I heard from a seminar that I watched last year, and they said that health is almost like a bank, right? And every time that you are doing something for your health positive, whether you're exercising, eating well, it's like you're investing. It's like you're putting money into the bank, right? And then every time,
from me, because that's exactly how I've been explaining it to all of my clients. It's like a nest
right?
egg that in 20, 30 years you're going to be drawing on. So like put your $50 away every week and let it build into the future. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's I just had my train of thought here. It's investing now in your health versus paying later,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that can kind of bring up another point when it comes to physical health. There are benchmarks, right? There are benchmarks in physical health. So when I, for example, used to do like standardized fitness testing, we would say, okay, let's measure your musculoskeletal health. So let's measure your flexibility. How long is your trunk endurance? And there are clinical norms for all of those benchmarks. And I think those benchmarks are important, and using the help of a physical movement specialist, like kinesiologist, a personal trainer, or the doctor can help you work out a plan to achieving those benchmarks. But we were talking earlier about certain benchmarks like BMI, right? There's a little bit of myth to what the BMI truly means to a person, an individual. And for those that are listening and aren't familiar with BMI, it's a clinical standard. It was developed by a mathematician, and it's used to kind of classify whether a person is underweight, normal weight, overweight, obesity classes 1, 2, and 3. But what it only factors is the person's height and the weight, and that is it, nothing else. It doesn't factor in anything else about the person's health. And then there's more increased research as of late that's showing that it's not as applicable anymore. There is still some clinical relevance, but it doesn't tell the full picture, right? So I think it's really important that when people are trying to address being healthier and they're trying to start a new lifestyle, that they don't become fixated on these benchmarks, and you don't become fixated on BMI, for example, because again, everything is relative. There are a lot of guidelines, and there may be a methodical approach to achieving those benchmarks if you do it in a progressive manner, or if you do it accordingly, because you may have limitations, or you might be on prescribed medication. It's a journey that I encourage people to go on, striving to be healthier. But having the right resources and having the right person alongside you to guide you is key.
Yeah, it's important to understand that for us, and Francesca and I definitely talked about this, that our role is to be sort of guides and help empower and inform our clients so that they have the tools to autonomously make up their own minds and decisions about how they want their health journey to be. So for me, for example, I always tell my clients, look, I'm in the passenger seat, you're in the driver's seat. I got a map, you just tell me where you need to go, and I'll tell you the best way to sort of get there. But how you get us there, whether you want to take us through a cornfield or like stay on the road, whatever, I'm totally fine for some off-road action every now and then. Let's have
right.
some. And I'm so glad you brought up the point about the BMI, because we've also talked, and how many trainers and other people have you known have scored, as obese on the BMI scale, because, according to the BMI, I'm obese. I'm like, dude.
Exactly. A bodybuilder can show up as obesity class 1 when they're quite, and again, a person being really lean doesn't tell the full picture of their overall health, but it just goes to show how skewed the BMI marker actually is, and it doesn't tell the whole picture. So we can't rely health on just that. Yeah. I think we gotta integrate everything. And again, keeping it to just physical health, there's other markers that are important, and there is evidence behind it. I think in one of my stories I had mentioned blood pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Blood pressure is a marker of your cardiovascular health. How much residual pressure is on your heart muscle and the arteries. And that can be influenced by a number of things. Your breathing can influence it. What you eat can influence it. Stress, genetics, so many things. So when a person shows up as pre-hypertension, which is maybe 130, 135 over 120, right? We're using that as a guideline, as a risk factor that like, okay, things might be like, if this persists, if this prolongs, then we might be increasing our risk for cardiovascular disease, right? But that may not be the only factor with cardiovascular disease. It's important to monitor these markers. It's not the only thing that's going to predispose a person to heart disease. So really understanding what those markers are and how it can influence your risk is really important.
And that's
so not being afraid to speak about it with not being afraid to speak about it with your physician. I think a lot of clients are afraid to ask questions, especially when it comes to their health. It's your health. So
they also partly don't know what questions to ask, and like they're afraid of stupid or.
Yeah, one of my clients will ask me about like the exercises that we're doing, and they're like, "Sorry, am I asking too many questions?" I'm like, "No, I I love when you ask questions because that means you're invested, and it also means that like maybe I can work on how I'm cueing you. Maybe I'm not explaining it appropriately, but I implore everybody to be informed about your health. It's your health. You have the right to know. There's no stupid questions."
Yeah. It's an important journey, like you've explained it, but also, the part where the client's role in it is not to just do what I'm telling you to, but really ask like you're making this investment. You have every right to understand what's involved in it and sort of the quote unquote method behind my madness. Why am I having you do this many sets or this many reps? Why am I prescribing that, you run 3 times a week for 20 minutes, doing light cardio? Because again, the person's picture isn't going to tell us everything. Like, how many times have you seen people who are skinny and people who are fat and thought to be, wow, you were nowhere, you're not in good shape? But I'm sorry, if I have a client who is fat, holding 200 pounds over their head, doing multiple reps with it, that person does not have a weak core problem at all.
Right.
And in the same way as you're looking at a skinny person with a visible six-pack and you go, wow, that person is healthy. It's like, are they really though? Like, they could be struggling with an eating disorder, in which case their mental health is completely on the fritz. And we've learned that as trainers over time, and I've certainly had to check my own biases about it to understand that the look isn't necessarily gonna tell you everything. And I've had clients look at me and be like, but you're the epitome of health and fitness. I'm like, dude, I have so many issues in my joints, like that I do not have super healthy joints. They cause me like detrimental issues sometimes, like, right?
Yeah.
What you're seeing on the outside is, conforms to an arbitrary set of rules or standards, doesn't mean that's necessarily how it is on the inside, right?
Right. So what do we think? So I'll turn the mic to you. What do you think if I'm a client and I've got no idea where to start when it comes to just improving a healthier lifestyle? I want to be healthier, mental health and social aspect of it aside. How can a person start their journey towards improving their physical health?
So what a great question. First of all, it's important. Like I said, I like to really put the client in the driver's seat and sort of tell them, this is what's available to you. What do you want? So understanding what their daily activities are like. I'm a strong believer in doing interviews with the clients, especially before you start with them, as an opportunity for the trainer to learn more about them. Like, what do you like to do? You like to play with your friends? Do you do any sports? Do you just like to chill? Do you have any kids you like to play with? Like, do you do a lot of walking? And then based on those things, understand what would you like to do more of?
Right.
like more hiking? Do you just want to do more playing with your children? And then I'll give you a perfect example. One of my clients was telling me, as a toddler who's 2 years old, and he loves to hold him up and pick him up and this and that. I'm like, great, let's work on like some overhead strengthening, right? Or like on some lateral and frontal plane work. Just make your shoulders a bit stronger, get your core a bit stronger, so you're not going to be one of those parents who bends down to pick up their toddler and then, oh, there goes my low back, or I'm too tired to keep going past 10 minutes with my kid. I know it is for me. Like, I have a 3-year-old, and man, after 15 minutes, God Lord, like I need a new or something. So that's where I like to start with a lot of my clients. Oh, hi, Jess. Where I like to start with my clients is understanding what their demand for physical life is every day, and then structure the training based on that. I'm not going to have them lifting tons of weight if they don't need to do that, or if they don't want to do that, right? They want to do something more fun. There was a new study actually released not too long ago, because there's a lot of talk in health and fitness, in the fitness world. Why are you having them do these exercises? They're not accomplishing anything. Stick to the basics: squats, deadlift, bench, overhead press, or whatever. But the study found that if you incorporate sort of those fun exercises that don't necessarily yield huge results, it still keeps the people committed and engaged and having fun. And that's really,
that's an important part.
For the average person, that's so important at the end of the day. Like, exercising should be fun. That's part of the health approach, right?
Yeah,
so,
I think you're bang on there.
We're getting close to the wrap up time, so I wanna sort of have you have the last word on this, and if you could sort of summarize everything we talked about in one or two main points, what would those points be?
When it comes to improving your overall health, if you choose to kind of take this journey or elevate this physical health improvement to your life, there are guidelines that have been well studied. We definitely have to advocate and try to promote those guidelines, but they are guidelines. Not everybody has the same starting point. So you want to take a look at where there may be some opportunity for improvement and work on them slowly. Try not to overwhelm yourself and be too ambitious. Just work with what you can within, like, be in the driver's seat. Right? You know what the guidelines are, you have some targets, and you can approach those targets at your own pace. And then just build consistency over time with those healthy habits. So I'm primarily focusing on really good sleep, movement, most days, if not every day of the week, and then just reducing how much and how often we're sitting.
Awesome.
Yeah, those guidelines are on CSEP guidelines.ca, or you can just Google 24-hour movement guidelines, and then it'll pop up, and then you can take a look at those resources and those notes for yourself.
Amazing. And with that said, Francesca, thank you so much. I always enjoy
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone who joined, and for everyone who will watch. We are going to put the video up, and please DM us. Let us know if you have any questions about any of this. We're giant nerds about this. We get asked questions and we love to talk about it, like, seriously. So please reach out if you have any questions, and have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.